And good evening, fellow voyagers in space and time. How are we all this evening? How are you? It is Monday again. We are still here. The world has not ended. We continue to exist as corporeal beings on this celestial voyage that we've all undertaken on. So there we are. Welcome one and welcome all. It is always good to be back. It's always good to be back. Fellow Miata pilots, excellent. Carry on. Although I must admit, my Miata is currently in a box off the road, awaiting time in order to get various bits and pieces done to it. It's all good, but I'm concentrating my efforts on my other car at the moment. So don't get me distracted on cars because we'll be here for hours. It's okay to get me distracted, but probably not that topic. But there we go. Aussie EV morning. So yeah, this is the lovely thing about, of course, about living on a spherical planet is there's all sorts of time zones. And it never ceases to be. There's something about time zones I find endlessly fascinating. The fact that you can, as far as I'm concerned, it's the evening, and yet other people it's in the morning, and then some people it's the afternoon. Some people are having lunch. Some people are possibly up in the middle of the night for reasons that probably don't need elucidating, particularly if they're watching my stream for some strange reason in the middle of the night time. I don't know where that would be actually, but somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, I suppose. I don't know actually, where is it midnight at the moment? Does anybody know? Glenn's living in the past. Yeah, I live in the 1980s. Some of you I know definitely live there as well. But anyway, so no matter where you are, which day you're on, which time period you actually happen to be in, or of course if you're watching this from the far distant future in some sort of weird replay mode of some historical significance, because obviously things that I said in the year 2021 will have great ramifications for future centuries. Welcome and hello. So if anybody is watching this in the 34th century, welcome. Wouldn't that be really weird? That would be actually quite cool. I have a message to all the potential time travellers and future denizens of watching this video, because there'll be some oddity like this. This would make a very good story, actually, wouldn't it? There's one artifact that survives the apocalypse, whatever the apocalypse that's coming is coming. There's one artifact that survives, and it happens to be this stream. Wouldn't that be funny? And all the historians of the future have as a memento of the year 2021 is Drew Wager waffling on about stuff. That would be really cool. But it's always waffle time, says Mad Monk. It is indeed, it's always waffle time. We always start. It's the middle of the night in Russia, says Alan. So if anybody's watching in Russia in the middle of the night, hello. There are no time zones with figments. Oh yeah, of course, yes, forgot about that. Yes, in fact, none of you actually exist, do you? You're just bits of text on the screen that are, put there by the Matrix gods to keep me amused on a Monday evening. Don't get me started on that whole kind of, what's the meaning of eternity? Because we'll go down that whole do we exist thing. We've been metaphysical in the past, and some people have been seriously mentally scarred, I think, on this stream by going down that route, and that's a problem. So we don't want to damage anybody's mental health. That's not really the point of these streams. They're supposed to be slightly edifying and kind of encouraging, rather than trying to cause people to question whether or not they in fact exist. Which, to be honest, is not a very healthy thing to do. Oh, stop it. All of you. Commander O'Connor lives in the 1880s. Excellent. Forsooth. Can I watch Twitch in the ISS? I don't know. I mean, do they have? I mean, they do have the internet on the space station. Does anybody know what sort of bandwidth they get up there? I mean, is it quite good? I don't know. Glenn says, welcome all nostalgic viewers watching the humble beginnings of the famous sci-fi writer Drew Wager before he was really famous. I don't want to be famous, I just want to be rich. Let's get this right straight away. Ask the time travelers if you ever achieved the #1 FFE stream. Yes, we still haven't got that. I do want to know. So if you do actually, if there's anybody watching this stream who is watching this in the future and has a mechanism, therefore, to visit the past around about now, so that's about 5 minutes past 8 on the 24th of May 2021, in and around the Ashford, Kent area in the UK, then please pop in and say hi. Wouldn't that be cool? Too late for me, says Commander Connor. Sanity and I are not on speaking terms. I don't think I've ever been anywhere close. It won't be cable on the ISS. No, I suppose it won't be cable on the ISS because it'd get wrapped around the planet. And at a certain point in time, either the cable would snap or the ISS would get very, very rapidly closer and speed up really badly towards the end. I think that wouldn't work very well. They do live stream from the ISS, so they've probably got better bandwidth than I have. Dear. Space can't be worth it without an internet connection. I suppose it's okay in Earth orbit because you're not very far away from whatever the thing is you're trying to stream to, is it? But presumably when you go further out into space, internet access. I mean, you wouldn't be able to play a Twitch game, would you? Because the ping would get mucked up by light speed. When you're in orbit around the moon, the best ping you can get is 1,000 milliseconds. So there's a limit. There's a limit to how far you could play a multiplayer game in space. That's interesting. Streaming from Mars. So you could stream something, but you couldn't actually interact with people in real time. So you got what I suppose we can simulate that here, couldn't we? Is actually what I have to do is I have to waffle for 20 minutes before any of you can say anything, and it would be like a Twitch simulation of streaming from Mars. And then at the 20-minute mark, I'd have to read all the chat and go, "Oh, that's a really good suggestion, Glenn," or Winnie, or whoever it happens to be, and then to answer it, and you guys have to wait another 20 minutes. I don't think that would be very fun. A Mars simulation of a Twitch stream. Dear, that'd be quite funny. It'll be like watching a stop motion show, just like normal Twitch. Yes, yeah, Twitch can be challenging, can't it? There we go. Anyway, hello Chris, hello John, Glenn, lots of people here. Anyway, it's lovely to see you all. So if you are new, I'm afraid this pre-proper chat waffle is entirely expected and entirely normal behaviour for me. I need to work on my Max Headroom impression because I look entirely too realistic. Well, this is Drew Wager Odyssey version. I've been upgraded. In fact, I'm Drew V2. I'm high fidelity now. Graphics capability has been enhanced. I'm much more realistic than I used to be. Dear. So there we go. So I will try and do a stream on the interesting situation we've ended up with Elite Dangerous Odyssey on Thursday. That's my normal Elite day. So if you are tuning in for some Elite stuff, I don't really talk about Elite on Monday because this is all about writing and trying to be creative. Retro stream is obviously Saturday, where we had the most underwhelming explosion ever in a PC computer game. That was quite good. And Thursday is obviously my Elite Dangerous stream. So we'll cover the whole thing, okay? Assuming it's working by then, on Thursday. So there we go. But tonight's all about writing. Tonight's all about writing, and general waffle and everything else as well. So that's basically what we talk about in context of science fiction and fantasy. Now we haven't done much on fantasy really, and I've actually tonight's topic when we get to it, because we're only 9 minutes into the stream and we can't possibly start on that yet. Tonight's topic actually is a cross-genre topic, okay, and it's a bit of a departure from what we've been talking about before, but we'll get to that. But what it does is it applies to both, so it kind of fits into fantasy and science fiction. Does Drew V2 have buffering issues? Only when he runs into things. Yep. JR19, he's watching from his phone. Oh, that's very modern. There's a topic. This has never happened before. Sometimes we get to the topic. Wait, I thought this was the proper chat. Yes, Kelly back. Oh, welcome back, Kelly Bug. Good to see you again for that. Yes, this is the proper chat. We will be chattering. True 2.0 has no wrinkles and a lot of repeating texture. Alas, as you can see, I do have quite a few wrinkles now. Topics were nice chocolate bars. We did a whole stream actually on confectionery from the 1980s, didn't we? That was quite good. So Skittles, large Skittles actually. Yeah, actually I think they're called giant Skittles. Those are my favourites at the moment. Yeah, I don't know if that's an internationally available thing, but giant Skittles, I can thoroughly recommend giant Skittles. Those are good. Particularly enjoy those. I've always, as you know, I've even got an emoji for them. Is that right? Is that the right word? Emoji? Strawberry bonbons. There you go. I like strawberry bonbons are a particular favourite too. Microsoft. What has a hazelnut in every bread? I do vaguely recall that from the 80s as well. So there we go. And then don't get me started on the whole marathon Snickers thing, because Snickers is obviously the current name, and most people won't remember what they were called before that. They were in the UK. They were called Marathon for reasons I don't understand, and there'll always be marathons to me. In the same way that what are those things called? The other ones are like they used to be called Opal fruits. Now they're called something else, and I've forgotten what they are. Snickers is fake. Yeah, exactly right. It is definitely marathon. Marathon is the correct word. This Snickers business, whoa, Snickers. I mean, who came up with that? Thought my favourite clip. Well, I do like waffles, but to be honest, I'm very partial to sweets. I have a very sweet tooth, and wagon wheels are really. Yeah. So what happened there? I mean, it was changed because of the possible with knickers. Is that Bertrand Russell's teacup? Says Naughty Body Wash. I suppose it could be. It's this one I was given where it's a kind of joke that Saturn doesn't weigh. Well, not weigh. It's wrong. Saturn's density is less than that of water. So if you had a glass big enough, you could float Saturn in it. I don't know if you can see that very clearly because it kind of gets washed out by the green screen effect. In fact, it's totally transparent, isn't it? But there is a Saturn in a teacup there, so that's kind of what all that's about. Opal fruits became Starburst. I mean, what's Starburst? That doesn't tell you anything. Because Opal fruits, though. I mean, Opal fruits. That's the right thing. Two giants walking down the road. One is eating chocolate. One asks, "What are you eating?" Chocolates. No smokies. Ah, dear. See, things were just things. Well, things were different, weren't they, in the olden days? I think that's the thing. But yes, sweets from the 80s, sweet that we used to have that just seem to have disappeared over the time. Texan bars was one I really liked. The adverts for those were really kind of weird. That the guy had to, he was always having one last request, and he'd basically have a Texan bar as his last. He kept getting caught all the time. I'm not quite sure. He wasn't a very good cowboy. But his last request would be to eat a Texan bar. And of course, it took so long to eat the Texan bar that all his captives fell asleep and he could just undo his bonds and walk off. At least I think that's how it worked. So those were good. Good old days, sweets of the 80s. Naughty Body Wash. Am I here to give us the lore reasons why the galaxies all of a sudden rendering poorly and got a lot darker? Well, I was struggling trying to find a lore reason why the spaceships in Frontier First Encounters, which is the third elite, actually had waggedy tails. I don't know if you spotted that on my stream, on the last couple of streams. Completely confused by that. So no, I mean, so we'll talk about Elite Dangerous on Thursday, but no, I have no lore explanation why the universe is quite a lot darker and not rendering properly. And why there's orange sidewinders everywhere. Yeah, that seems to be a thing as well. So we need to explain this. There must be a lore reason. We'll have to go investigate that. But that'll be Thursday. That will be Thursday. So yes, a bit of a shame for. I do feel, just as a slightly serious aside for a very short number of minutes, I do feel very mostly sorry, but slightly concerned actually for the the community management folks at Frontier, because they're taking a lot of flack, and they're also getting quite a lot of personal insults, which I think is very poor behaviour by the community in that regard. And that's a shame, because that shouldn't be happening. If execs make a screw up, that's one thing, and they clearly have in this example, and there's no excusing that. But everybody else is just an employee, and they're just trying to do their jobs, and we certainly shouldn't be giving them a hard time because they don't have any answers to give us. That's not their fault. So the actual coders and the community team, and the people there who I'm sure are not responsible for this mess, are shouldering a lot of the flack, and unfortunately taking some personal bile into the thing as well. We as a community should make sure that collectively we don't cause them any more stress than anything else that's going on. I think personally, corporately, we are and quite rightly so, giving the organisation a bit of a spanking, and that's exactly the right thing to do for what's happened here. But it's not personal. I think that's the difference. It's down to management, and David Braben's actually held his hands up and apologised on one of the forum posts. So. It's a start, I suppose. Let's see what happens next. But let's not take it out on individual people that we know. And so I've met many of the community teams, quite a few of the developers. Certainly over the years in my involvement with Frontier, and they're all good folks. They haven't deliberately tried to screw things up. It's a management failing, and it's up to management to sort it out. So there we go. So yes. Anyway, enough of that. We're not talking about Elite Dangerous. Stop it. Fine. So anyway, tonight's topic. Tonight's topic. What do I want to talk about? Well, oddly enough, it was prompted by my son's conversation with me earlier on, where he said, "Your pineapple's a really dangerous thing, Dad." And he has this tone of voice. Okay, he has this tone of voice when I know he's trying to wind me up. Pineapple's really dangerous, and it's like he's just cast the line out. Okay, pineapples are really dangerous, Dad. Yeah. Okay. Pineapples are really dangerous. All right. Why? And he said, "Did you know, Dad?" I said, "I probably didn't, son." This is how our conversations go. He said, "Well, did you know?" "No, we've established that I didn't know, son." He said, "Well, pineapple, Dad, it's dangerous." I said, "Yes, you've told me this. It's dangerous because as you're eating it," he said, right, as you're eating pineapple. I said, "Well, I've ate pineapple in the past." He said, "Yes, but there's something you don't know about pineapple. When you eat pineapple, it starts dissolving your taste buds." And he says, "So while you're eating it, it's eating you." And okay, thanks for that information, son. He said, "Just something for you to consider." So. I don't know if that's true or not, but he's found it somewhere on the internet, so it probably is or probably isn't. I have no idea, but that's what he told me. Which got me to thinking about food, which is something that's very close to my heart, actually. Usually my stomach, obviously. That's where food tends to be. But food. Okay, now here's the thing. Here is the thing. Food in space, all right, or food actually in fantasy novels as well. Now this is something that I was thinking about all this afternoon, because it does. Food doesn't work properly in novels, all right. Humanity consumed by pound. I don't know. How do you have to try, or how much pineapple you have to eat, or how long you have to leave it in your mouth before it does what it does. But grapefruit interferes with certain medicines. Oh, there we go. Must be true if you found it on the internet, obviously. But food in novels is very strange. And I must admit, I do have a list of. And here's a writing tip, actually. Slightly serious note. Here's a writing tip: to have a list of things that you need to go through when you're checking up your novel. Okay. And there's usual things that I've gone through before, like, checking all the adjectives and checking all the adverbs and doing a grammar pass and doing a continuity check and all those very sensible things. The other thing is, if your characters are in a protracted situation, when did they last have something to eat? Okay, now you may, the act of your characters having some food may happen off camera, okay? But sometimes it's worth just mentioning it as part of your writing, because it's, our behaviour is often dictated by how hungry we are, or, and particularly in sort of post-apocalyptic type stuff, or places where food is scarce, or you're struggling for whatever reason, or you're tired and your provisions are running low, whatever happens. Your characters should be thinking about, where's my next meal coming from, okay? And all those sort of things. So it's actually quite a useful thing to just have a think about in your story. Okay, when did my characters last have a meal? And and you can chuck a stomach rumble in, or my mouth's getting dry, all those sort of things, to kind of just give a bit of flavour to the scenario, just so you know where your characters are. Have a second breakfast, yeah. So that's a little tip, because one of the best pieces of advice I was given for writing wise is, make sure you engage all of the senses and all of the feelings. Now, one of the things that we tend to almost always concentrate on as writers when you're starting out is to just do the visual, okay? So you walk into a room and you see the chair and you see the table and you see the window and you see the light coming through the window and it's casting patterns on the floor, and you can see the colour of this and the colour of that, etc., etc. That's how most of us tend to write. And we do very visual description of things. One of the best pieces of advice I was given is to make sure you don't just do the visual. Okay, so do some other feelings as well. So what's the sense of the room? What does it smell like? Does it smell old and musty? Does it smell fresh? Is somebody been through an air freshener? Has is there something stale? Is there something rotten and dead on the floor? Although depending on where you are. All those sort of things. Does it smell very mechanical? Is it full of greasy kind of air? Is there an oily smell in the air, or an electrical short type smell? Is it smoky? All those kind of things. All those things are quite good to engage the senses. And then if there's something like a table surface that your character can run their fingers over, and just feel the sense of the room as well. Those things are quite good to kind of just make your description a little bit more interesting. So there's a top tip: is engage as many senses as you can. So all those sort of things. And Commander O'Connor says, "Why does nobody ever use the bathroom?" That's a very good point. I mean, how much detail do you want to go into? There is a difficulty there, because if you're in a very action orientated story, everyone's stopping to, well, actually, before we have that big fight and that showdown with the evil baddie, let's stop and have a meal, shall we? But so you've got to pick your moment. But quite often a meal is a good time for the characters to figure out their next move, or to just reflect a moment, because tomorrow we have to do the thing. So tonight before we go to bed and turn in, we're just going to have a bit of a meal and chat things. So sometimes it's quite a good vehicle for kind of moving things on, character wise. And when people are having a meal, they tend to be more chatty, because first they're focused on getting the food, and then they tend to relax a bit with food, because A, you're slightly more tired because your stomach is digesting the food, but B, you're more satisfied, you've had some food, so you generally feel a bit better and a bit more well disposed towards people. So sometimes it's quite a good vehicle for doing that kind of stuff. So food is actually quite a good literary device. Bring on the guard. I think you do that. So Alan makes a point that quite an awful lot of the time you see your characters running around all the time, and day happens and night happens and the characters just keep going. It's like, that's not right. Having your characters fall asleep or get weary, or any of those things, is actually better for, dare I say it, the immersion when you're reading a story. The characters have physical limitations. You can't just keep them. The one thing I didn't like, here's a good example of something that always grates with me, is that Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli, and I know they're sort of slightly supernatural characters because one's an elf, one's a dwarf, and one is a man of Numenor. But they run non-stop, pretty much, from where they leave Frodo and Sam on the river, virtually all the way across Rohan, a distance, when you work it out, of several hundred miles, effectively kind of non-stop. It's just like, I don't care how fit you are, it just isn't possible. So stuff like that is kind of like, okay, and at least it feels like that. Maybe they are stopping for a rest, and some of the time. But and how far can somebody run continuously? It just doesn't feel quite right, does it? Gimli was always 20 feet behind, but never seemed to be more than 20 feet behind. But at least in the movies, he complained very, 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 very dangerous over short distances. So they're taking the Hobbits to Iris. I love that. I do love that YouTube. I can watch that for hours. And it's just, I don't know what it is. It's just something in that. They're taking the Hobbits to Isengard. God. I just love it. It just appeals to the completely, I don't know, juvenile, infantile sense of humour that I have quite a lot of time. Just absolutely love that video. And Gimli has the guy who's not built for cross country. So all that that's quite fun. So there's things like that. Okay, now here's another. Let's because we're picking on Tolkien, and why not? Okay, because he's the master of fantasy, so he's game as far as I'm concerned. Here's another thing. Okay, so when they left the Shire, the hobbits are reasonably well equipped for a journey to Bree or whatever it is. And it's not all that far away for them. So they walk along and they've got backpacks full of food and stuff, okay? And they go for a nice hike and they eventually get to Bree and so on and so forth. And then they replenish their food stocks and they make it all the way to Rivendell eventually, okay? And there's lots of adventures and, stuff like that. Now that I can just about believe, all right? But when the Fellowship of the Ring departs from Rivendell and heads south, okay, they get all the way down the edge of the Misty Mountains, through the mines of Moria, and obviously where Gandalf dies, and then there's only 8 of them, obviously, and to the the elves on the other side. Where's that? That's Lady Galadriel, wherever that is. Lorien. Lorien. Yeah, they get all the way from Rivendell to Lorien on one backpack's worth of food. Okay, and yes, I know lembas bread. But okay, so we got so maybe you just chuck in some magic elven bread, but in reality, okay, you can't carry that much food, can you? Or I don't know, or very, very, very efficient packing. I mean, yeah, they weren't carrying that much stuff, were they? I mean, they certainly weren't in the movies. And how much? I mean, if you're going to walk, and bearing in mind it was winter, okay. Bearing in mind it was winter and they had to go up a mountain, and then they came back down a mountain unsuccessfully. Then they went through the mines in Moria. Pretty darn cold in times, I'd have thought. It was only an hour of the film. But I mean, assuming Tolkien got his kind of maps right, there's a distance of several hundred miles they hiked there, okay? Now, if anybody's ever done any serious hiking, you will know the amount of energy you burn, particularly in a cold weather environment, is pretty high. Okay, they would be very trim by the time they finish that. So I feel like they weren't quite equipped provisions wise for the journey that they were on. Maybe they were hoping to catch something on the way. I don't know. I don't know if they did in the story. I can't remember. I don't recall it because I recently reread Lord of the Rings, as you know, and I don't recall them hunting along the way. Okay, so maybe but they didn't have the. Did they have the lembas bread? No, the lembas bread was given to them by the Lady Galadriel, wasn't it? So they didn't have lembas bread setting out from Rivendell, as far as I recall. So Commander Shorty walked 150 miles in a week once. Yeah, I had a car like that too. Alan reckons you need 500 grams of dried food per day. Okay, so that's a fair bit. So I don't know. They did have Bill the Pony, I suppose. Yes, that's good. Good point, Glenn. Maybe Bill the Pony was, poor old thing, was stacked with provisions. Had monks off, would walk 500 miles, and then walk 500 miles more. Somebody else is going to have to finish that for me, because I'm just not going to. I'm not going to give Mad Monks off his moment of glory. I'm just not. It's like reloading guns in. It's like bang 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 bang. I haven't run out of bullets yet. Bang 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 bang. So it's a super pony. So one of the passes I did in editing is the sleep cycle and the food cycle realistic for my stories? Because there were and I got a little bit of criticism, as I think I mentioned before, in Shadewood 3 for not giving the characters a break. It was this crisis, end of book, crisis. And I did think about that whilst I was reading book 4. And in book 4, I did have two at least, two moments where the characters basically just had to look out for, we can't go on like this. We've got to stop and have a rest, and we're going to have some food because it's a necessity. And actually, it was a really useful thing, because I could get the characters to sit down and basically take stock a bit. And because they had a moment to breathe in between the crises, then actually some quite good character interactions came out of the fact they were just literally sitting down, stopping, having a meal, and going, "This is hard work, isn't it?" One of the things Robert Jordan addressed in The Eye of the World, they all get really hungry and have to hunt tiny morsels just as well. So I did that in Shadewood. I had Kiri, I think, on a couple, possibly one or at least possibly even two occasions, go off and hunt some stuff, so they had some food, because it felt realistic. We've crashed they've crashed in this place. Our provisions have been destroyed. We're now stuck with nothing other than the kind of clothes we're standing in, and we haven't got any food right now. So what's our first priority? Get some food, and all that sort of stuff. So, and and second breakfast and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So, and tea. Yeah, we need tea. So that would, if British people were in shape with their basically we're having a cup of tea, all those sort of things. So you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it, but I think sometimes it's important to realise that your characters are actually human beings. They have needs like that. Now you don't need to go into everything, because obviously if you eat, you also need to excrete. Now I don't think there are many novels, certainly not science fiction and fantasy, that address that particular issue. And I don't think it would make for very good reading either, would it? So I'm not necessarily suggesting you do that, but I think it's worth thinking about, because I think it's the fact that humans have got limitations. Just because of normal physiology and stuff. The fact that we need to sleep. In my Shadewood books, it was a useful thing to have them sleep, because of course the planet is tidally locked, so there isn't any night on the Shadewood planet. So actually having them to sleep because they were getting tired was just an instinctive thing for them, and it allowed you to highlight the fact that the world around them, there was no sunset, everything stayed the same, but they still had to sleep because they were human. So all those sort of things. And if you do a lot of fighting, okay. Trust me, you're going to be pretty knackered by the end of it. I did a day once of before COVID. I used to do a lot of martial arts stuff, and we would do days where we were effectively graduating to the next belt. And I remember the green to blue one that I did, and I did like a day's worth of martial arts. So my age, that was enough. The time I got to the evening, I was literally a zombie. My brain was off, my body was sort of completely knackered and shaking, because I was physically exhausted by it. I'm relatively fit, but that was more than my body was really up to doing that particular day. And when I I got to bed, I just literally crashed because I was physically and mentally exhausted because there's a lot of concentration, a lot of physical exertion. So I'm pretty sure if you were in a major battle, swinging your axe around or swinging your sword around or using your laser pistol or whatever it happens to be, burning off a lot of physical energy, at the end of it, once the thing is solved, or if you're dead, you're dead, but if you're still alive at the end of all that, and unless there's still a crisis going on, you're going to be pretty tired. So it's appropriate that you maybe just fall down in a heap and collapse. Okay. So those sort of things, you don't make your characters invulnerable. So I mean, I had had that situation in Shadewood where at one point one of the characters, Akiri again, I think it is, she's basically been on this boat for quite a long time, and she's been seasick. She doesn't travel well on, so she's been seasick for like 2 hours or 3 hours, wherever it happens to be. And as a result of that, when the next crisis comes along, she's literally just she's pulling herself back on deck, trying to get some fresh air, having just been heaving her guts out, poor girl, and feeling really, really green and groggy. And so as she steps out and then suddenly there's a crisis and she has to fight for her life, she's not actually in the best of physical condition at that point in time, so she starts to lose really badly, which is realistic. No matter how good she is at actually fighting, if she's against somebody who's fresh and is not feeling seasick, she's going to lose, and of course she does. So that is, so stuff like that is making sure that your characters don't just shrug off whatever it was that just happened to them, because that's not realistic. Okay. So if you've just been in a car crash, you're not going to be at your best. Or if you've just crashed your spaceship, then the fact that you might be feeling a little bit disorientated and maybe there's a bit of blood coming down your arm because there's a somebody's whacked you or whatever happens, all those things take an impact. All right. So, and you must listen to that. You can't put your character through endless physiological or psychological trauma and expect them just to go, it's okay. And just kind of get back on whatever it was they were doing and be awesome still, unless you're in a particular genre where that's okay, where everyone's got superhuman powers. But it depends what you're writing. Okay, so there we go. Someone's given me a raid. Alien Creative raid. Thank you very much for the raid. I do appreciate that. I didn't spot that. So thank you very much for the raid. And anybody who's here with Alien Creative, welcome to the Am Writing Fantasy and Science Fiction waffle stream. It's good for you to be here. Thank you very much indeed. If you're going to make a character indestructible, give them vulnerability. So you can't. If your character has to survive to the end of the story, then you have to survive in a realistic way. And I think one thing that always annoys me about some of the action films. I know military people, SAS or those kind of Navy SEALs, whatever they happen to be, are incredibly tough dudes, okay, and dudettes. But there is a limit to what the human body can actually cope with. I tend to favour a little bit of human body reacting to trauma. So, and I certainly wouldn't wish any of these things on you. But I have been in quite a nasty car crash, and I have been in a situation where I nearly died because I had a heart problem, and those experiences I still recall quite well. I can still remember the sort of physiological and psychological reactions I had to them as a result of going through that traumatic experience. And I'm a relatively fit and healthy person, but immediately following those events, I was not 100% firing on all cylinders. Okay, it's just you just aren't. All right. So if you get blown up and you're not expecting it, that's going to have an impact, literally. Okay, I had a car crash, and you are, there's physiological and psychological impacts of things like that can really alter your perceptions of things. And you know, if you're going to do that to one of your characters, then have a consideration for what that might do to them. I think that can sometimes help you be realistic. Now, a few people have said, you know, if it's fantasy, just have a health potion or a medikit or something like that. Now, if you want to do that, you can. One of the reasons I actually, and I'm not saying you can't, because that's a trope that is established in things, but it's a bit of to my way of thinking, it's an easy way out of actually having a slightly more interesting story. One of the things I liked in Lord of the Rings, for example, is when Gandalf is an extremely powerful magic wizard, okay, but he doesn't just go around, it's okay, I'll just heal you. He doesn't do that, because that's not the way magic works in Tolkien's world. And I think having limitations on what magic or what science fiction cures can do is quite a good thing. Death is still a problem in Lord of the Rings. Clearly, lots of people die. So James Bond is. I mean, I like a James Bond film, but it's like, really, he survived that, really? Leaping from things and jumping out of cars' eyes, being all sorts of stuff. So all of those things, again, it depends what you're writing. Okay, if you're just wanting to write an action adventure flick where the hero is just a big bold guy who can't be destroyed, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're wanting to write something, I suppose that, it depends what your objective is and who your readership is. If your readership is I've always defined my stories as I want my characters to be people go, actually, yeah, that's somebody who's believable. They're not superhuman. They're prone to making errors, and when they get whacked over the head with something, they fall down, and that's it, and they get dragged off. That's it. Depends on what you're trying to achieve. Now, I've always striven. Is that a word? Striven? Strove? I always strive. It's quite bad for a writer. I don't know what tense to use. I always strive. That's what I do. And is that striven or strove? Or strived? I don't know. What is it? I always strive to do something. Is it? What's the past tense? Striven. Striven, says Alan. Ah, dear. Struveness. Ah, dear. So I don't need the doctor for my broken arm, just a stim pack. Yes, you see, well, Strivener. Oh, is that maybe that's where that comes from? Striven, strived, Ah, dear. Right, sorry. Strive, strove, have stroved, says Buffo. Past tense is striven. Is it? Thank you very much, Chris. So I've always striven. That doesn't sound right. That's another weird thing. This is a slight offside. When you say a particular word quite a lot, like striven, I've just been saying striven too much. At a certain point in time, I think it's maybe about 5 or 6 repetitions of the word, suddenly there's like a mental thing that flips in my head, and just no matter what I do with it, it sounds wrong. So now I've got that with striven. Can't take it seriously. So The Expanse. That was I thought you're a very good spot on that, actually, Glenn. That's I think a weak point in The Expanse is that you stick your arm in a thing, don't you? And you kind of jiggle about a bit in pain, go like that, and then at the end of that process, after about 20 seconds, you're fine. Just kind of like, okay, the great undertaking towards which we have striven these many months. Oh, there we go. I'm in the company of Eisenhower, so it can't be too bad. Striven is good. That's a little bit too magic-y, which is a bit of a shame. If your characters, you can obviously in science fiction you can invent any technology you wish. Star Trek has it, doesn't it? They have a I don't know what they call them. They have all sorts of things, don't they, on Star Trek? They're all kind of salt and pepper machines, but you pointed to the person. Have I got anything that I can use as a prop? I should have something. There we go. I'm going to use I don't need to. I've got a paint pot. That'll do. Star Trek, you sort of just do this, don't you? And everything's okay. I've just healed you all, okay? So you should all be feeling fine now. And usually maybe there's a beam of coloured light, and the beam of coloured light can sew things up as well. Have you noticed that on Star Trek? It can heal wounds and bruises and all sorts of things, and fix broken. It's amazing how stuff can work. So in Star Trek, they just sort of magic it away with beams of light and effects that can fix broken arms and cuts and things, just like that. Interesting enough, I don't think on Star Wars you tend to see anybody survive, do you? They're either dead or they're not. You don't generally see people being injured all that much on Star Wars, to think about. I mean, obviously people get their hands chopped off or their insides gutted by a lightsaber, and that happens. And Star Wars' approach to mending things seems to be to replace them with bits of electronics, doesn't it? So that's how Star Wars does it. They do actually. No, that's a good point. Yeah, they do have the Bacta tank. So you drop somebody in a big vat of liquid in it, does stuff. Hypospray real thing. So yes, that's right. They fixed Darth Vader up with also. Yeah, that worked. I think not sure if the cure is better than the problem there. So different franchises take different approaches to how they fix medical issues. Which I think is quite interesting. So fantasy does the same things. So some people, there will be healers. So in Dungeons and Dragons, for example, you can just cast a healing spell, and there we go. That'll work. Whereas in some more sort of gritty fantasy, if you are maimed, then that's it. You're maimed, and then there's not much we can do for you other than ease your passing, kind of thing. So those sort of things are. Depends on the genre and depends on the environment you're writing. So anyway, and thank you for the follows. I haven't got a follower ping thing because it's very distracting. It's got a very, very simple stream set up with some chat and just me. Okay, I'm a talking head. So those sort of things. I think sometimes it's worth, depending on what you're writing and how you're trying to set your story out, is to have a bit of a think about the physiological needs of your characters. If they've been walking for like 20 miles, then you probably want a break. Don't keep them going because they will drop dead. Or what you start doing there is you start losing the realism or the sense of suspension of disbelief. What in gaming terms everyone calls immersion nowadays. It's suspension of disbelief. I can believe these guys are going on a long hike because I have seen them stop and have a rest every so often. So that sort of makes sense. There should be negative consequences if they're forced by situation or some other thing to march further than they would normally march on less food than they would normally be wanting to carry, or less water, or whatever it happens to be. There should be some negative consequences for that, which you should, as a good writer, be able to play into your story. So all those sorts of things. Is that an Australian accent I hear? No, it's not. It's a very British accent, I should say. I'm as Chris has said, I'm Canadian by birth, but very much British. Thank you very much, Chris. Yes, so that is very true. Yes, I am pretty British. Oddly enough, and I've explained this before. I live in the United Kingdom, which at the moment isn't a very United Kingdom, but that's just a political statement. The United Kingdom is currently, and I say the word currently advisedly, 4 separate countries. Okay, so the United Kingdom is composed of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, not Southern Ireland. That's another place. It's very confusing right now because, of course, Southern Ireland is still in the European Union. Northern Ireland isn't because part of the United Kingdom. Great Britain is a separate entity which is concerned with the island of Great Britain, of which Northern Ireland isn't a part. So you can refer to the United Kingdom of Great Britain, which is basically Wales, Scotland, and England, and Northern Ireland, and then that makes the United Kingdom. So the country I live in is England, the island I'm on is Great Britain, but the the overall organisation that I belong to is called the United Kingdom. I think I've got that right. And being Canadian by birth means that I'm not actually not actually English or Welsh or Scots. But I am a citizen of the United Kingdom because I now have dual nationality. But technically, I'm a Canadian. So it's all very confusing. So that's a problem. And this is why taverns existed. taverns in fantasy novels. How many fantasy novels start with, and they rocked up to the local tavern. The local tavern, that's the first place you should go to find out what the heck's going on in any fantasy novel, is go to the tavern, because that's the place. So those sort of things are quite interesting. I'm a North American. Yes, I suppose I am, actually, yeah. So there we go, I can be an American too. And my ancestors come from Ireland, I think. Well, at least some of them do, so it's all very confusing. And I'm not a big fan of nationalities anyway, as I think I've explained before. I sort of regard myself as a citizen of Earth. But if I've got to have an allegiance, it will probably be to Canada. Just nobody hates the Canadians. Everybody else has got an issue with somebody else. I don't think there's anybody who really, really doesn't like the Canadians. So maybe they're okay. I don't know. Jimmy Doohan was another Canadian who tended to sound British. Now I'm in good company there, then, so that's okay. So that's good. But the whole thing with the way food is treated in novels is a bit weird. So sometimes it's just worth having a step back and having a think about it, because it's quite a useful way to kind of just ground your story out and try and make it sort of fit together a little bit more interesting. There's lots of other bits and pieces that are related to that. So I've already sort of touched upon the need for sleep. That's don't try and go without sleep for more than a few days. Okay, it does really, really odd things to you. If you really want to go on a trip, then try and stop yourself from sleeping. Okay, I tried it once as a student. I do not recommend it. Just don't. Okay. We did it as a sort of dare when I was at university once. It's a very, very stupid thing to do. Okay, very, very odd things happen to you when you don't sleep. Okay. It's very, very strange indeed, and it took me quite a long time to recover from the experiment. So I really don't recommend it. You can't, if in a writing context, you can't just make your characters do without sleep. You just can't do that, okay? Unless you're going to intervene with some sort of miraculous, thing, and that depends on the rules of the world. Stuff like that is not good. The other thing that's a lot of fun to play with, and I did this with Shadewood 4 in particular, is if your characters get drunk. Okay, so it's quite fun actually, particularly if you're dealing with characters who haven't been exposed to alcohol or anything like that. Now I'm not suggesting that you should go, I'm going to give my characters drugs. To see what happens. That's not what I'm recommending, but because writing is a way to obviously vicariously experience things that you otherwise wouldn't experience, and they do say when you write what you know. Now you may be surprised to know, okay, that I have occasionally got drunk. And so I'm reasonably familiar with the experience. And you can use things like that to, quite a lot of comedic value in your script. If you want to have a little bit of light relief in the story at a particular point, because, sci-fi novels and fantasy novels can at times be very heavy. Okay, and Lord of the Rings did this in the films. I don't know if there's a scene in the books for this. I'm not sure if I recall it. But I quite like the scene in Lord of the Rings where Gimli and Legolas have a drinking competition. And Legolas is sort of like, yes, I can feel slight tingling in my fingers. And then Gimli's basically, just falls over on the floor. Completely out of it because he's had about 20 pints or whatever it was. So so that is. I felt was quite a nice touch, just to sort of cement the friendship between Gimli and Legolas. Now, I don't think that happened in the book, but I thought it was quite a nice touch in the film. And I did something similar in Shadewood. I had a situation where the two of the characters got a little bit drunk without realising they were getting drunk. They had this sort of fluid, this stuff that was in this plant, and they didn't know it was alcoholic. Or laced with something like alcohol anyway, and as a result of that, they, of course, what happens when you have too much alcohol is you start to lose your inhibitions, and so that's what happens to those characters in that situation. And that can be quite fun. So you can sort of see a bit more what they're like when they let their guard down. So again, as a writer, here's a way for you to actually show a little bit more about the personality of your character, because when people get drunk, interesting things tend to happen. Some people get really loud, as you've probably seen at parties and things. Okay, some people get really quiet. Some people get really moody. Some people start just pontificating on stuff for no obvious reason, and people's response to being a bit tipsy or getting slightly smashed is quite interesting. And as a writer, that's a useful little thing for you to use. Okay, let's get the characters a bit tipsy at this point for some reason. Maybe it just things get out of hand at a party, or maybe this something's really bad happened and everyone just said, look, here's a shot of brandy or some heavy liquor that just because we need something, we need to pick me up, and maybe it gets a bit too far or something like that. So those things you can use to your advantage, and it can be quite fun just to write a scene where your characters have just got drunk for whatever reason. So all that sort of stuff is things that you can play with. Okay. And Commander Shorty's quite right. They were in the pub when they first figured out the danger, and they did get a bit tipsy, didn't they? And then they mucked about, and then Aragorn pops in and kind of scoots them off before they get into trouble. So all that sort of stuff can be quite a nice little literary device. Kelly Bagger says a character in Brian McLean's Powder Mage who does not sleep, but this is a special ability. Okay, so weave those things in if you need. It's quite fun to play around with those sort of things and see what kind of happens. So I was able to use this sort of scene where people get slightly drunk to emphasize the overconfidence of one character. It's basically a case, I know what I'm doing, you don't need just I know what I'm doing, just follow me, everything will be fine. You're in trouble if somebody says that. And of course it all goes wrong and something bad happens and etc. And then basically at that point you've got the fun also of writing a situation where your characters have got to get out of whatever trouble they're now in, but they're slightly drunk. They pick up a sword and they drop it, or they fumble or something like that, they fall flat in the face. Those sort of things can be quite fun to play around with. Or you can use them to punish them the day after. When the hangover kicks in, and the characters basically say, "Oh, just I'll be fine. Just get me to some coffee," all those sort of things. And it makes your characters more. You can tell actually. They kind of lost it there. They weren't so well behaved. They've let themselves down a bit. Or they threw up in the night or something like that. And it gives you more of a sense of humanity for these characters. So things like that. I mean, don't get them drunk all the time, but consider it as a narrative device to further the aims of your novel. There's many situations in some quite good writing where a character will basically turn to the bottle and get smashed out of their head because they can't cope with whatever the situation is that's in the story at that point in time, and that's okay. I think that's a perfectly valid common reaction. It's what people do sometimes, isn't it, when they're confronted with an impossible situation, bad news or a loss, is they just go and get themselves smashed, and there's no reason why your literary characters can't do the same thing. So, that can be quite a powerful thing. And then somebody else obviously is around, probably trying to pick up the pieces and keep them on the straight and narrow. And that interaction between the person when they're drunk and the other person who's sober, trying to kind of get them back into place, can be quite powerful as a thing to move the characters on. It's a good way to make them relatable too, fighting dragons or whatever, and then they've got to go and have an ale. Yeah, so that's right. Most of us don't get to fight dragons, but most of us can relate to having a beer, and all this sort of thing. And Tyrion Lannister, so there's lots of things in Game of the Thrones which work on this kind of thing. People who like a drink. Or and sometimes being an alcoholic is a defining characteristic of a character as well. So that could be something that can happen as well. Dorothy and the others get high on poppies in Wizard of Oz. I saw a lovely description of the Wizard of Oz actually. I think it was on Facebook. I must have bookmarked it years ago. It basically it's a newspaper cutting from a TV sort of TV guy. It basically says. Wizard of Oz, young girl murders first person she encounters after a magical experience and sets off with 3 strangers to murder more. That's a brilliant way of describing the Wizard of Oz. So yeah. The problem is booze is an overused plot device. Yes, you don't want to do it too often. So the old classic. To be honest, in fantasy novels, it's quite often overused because the adventure starts by meeting mysterious strangers in a tavern. Like, how often have we seen that one? Colonel Ty and Battlestar Galactica. There's another one. Yeah. So you want to be wary of it. But having a highly flawed character sometimes is a useful thing. And you can make them flawed in all sorts of ways. It doesn't just have to be alcohol, but that's an important thing. The other thing, if you're going to make them alcoholic, you have to provide a means for them to get hold of the alcohol. Okay, so where's he getting this drink from? So Michael Garibaldi in Babylon 5. Now there's another great character. I really liked Garibaldi, and you kind of feel sorry and disgusted for him as he slides further into alcoholism, don't you? So that's a good character, but tended to come good as well. A character that is sort of is basically good but not very dependable is also quite an interesting one. Is he going to make it this time round? All those sort of things. And that depends a lot. Obviously, if you're building a character-based story, which is what I like to do. You may be going for something that's much more hard science fiction, where the characters don't matter. So if you look at Arthur C. Clarke's novels, most of the time in most of his novels, the characters don't really have much in the way of personality or flaws. They're just, most of the time, professional people doing professional jobs, and they just kind of get on with it. Obviously Clarke has a psychotic computer in the form of HAL 9001. Not 9001, 2000. No, what was he? HAL there he is. No, he's HAL 9000 in 2001. That's right. So those sort of things. But most of the humans in Arthur C. Clarke's novels, for example, are probably quite bland compared to other novels, and that's fine because Arthur C. Clarke's kind of science fiction was all about the science that was going on, and big galaxy-changing concepts and all that sort of stuff, which is a very, very different style of writing. Neither's right, neither's wrong. It's just a different thing. It depends what you're trying to do. Lots of fairy tales which seem like drug fuel. Yes. So fairy tales are an odd thing, aren't they? Particularly if you read some of the original versions of them. If you look at the Grimm's fairy tales, the original stuff, stuff like Cinderella and Snow White and all those kind of things. If you read the original versions, okay, not the Disney versions, but the original one, they're really dark. Cinderella, in the Disney version, it's going, "Ooh, does the slipper fit on your foot? Oh no, it doesn't. Oh, it fits on Cinderella's foot. Isn't that nice? Yay, off she goes to the ball." That's the Disney version. In the Grimm's version, in the original version, they hack off bits of the ugly sister's feet in order to try and get them into the slipper. So you've got to imagine this slipper, hacked foot, and blood everywhere. It's just not very nice at all. So yeah, so very odd things. Okay, very odd things in some of they're just very very strange. Stepsisters, sorry, not ugly sisters. Yeah, and yeah, probably just ruined Cinderella for you now. So they chop off their toes. I mean, just so they can marry the prince. Maybe. I mean, it's not a good deal, is it? So those things are very, very odd. I don't know what's going on there. So just, it's again one of those things to think about. The whole way that food is treated, the way that sleep is treated. The classic one in fantasy actually that really irritates me is the magic horse. I think I've mentioned this before. The magic horse really winds me up because anybody who knows anything about horses, you ride a horse for a certain distance a day. Okay, a horse is not like a car. All right, you can't fill it up with food and water and expect it to go again. Horses are animals. Okay, they don't just instantly recharge. Yeah, in a fantasy novel, it's absolutely fine quite a lot of the time for you to ride your horse, gallop across the fields, for a couple of hours, stop, recharge your horse by giving it a bag of oats at the tavern, and then ride it all the way back again. Sorry, horses can't do that. You can't have an insta recharge horse. It's not possible. Horses in fantasy novels are often used like cars. They just sort of, you just get on your horse and ride to the destination. Well, if your horse has done 20 miles of riding, it's actually going to be quite tired. And it's not going to go for another 20 miles. Horses just don't do that. That's why there's 2 coconuts. So Shadowfax. Unless it's a magic horse. I mean, if it's a magic horse, you can make up anything you need, of course. But Tolkien most of the time was pretty good about things like that. Shadowfax was a mayoress, wasn't he? Which is some sort of ancient race of super horses. There seem to be a lot of ancient races of super beings in Lord of the Rings mythology, which I suppose is fine. That's what he wanted to do, and then everything else is sort of degrees less going down, isn't it? So the Numenor men were lived longer than everybody else, and there was quite a lot of talk about the race of Numenor and the race of the the Ents, and they were all kind of in their hierarchy, which is how Tolkien did it. And I think somebody mentioned in the chat earlier on about the magic in Lord of the Rings actually comes from a musical sort of form that was created in the beginning of time, which is a nice piece of mythology actually, and it at least it made sense. But an awful lot of fantasy doesn't have quite that so much background research to it. Now, I'm not suggesting if you want to write a fantasy novel, you need to spend years and decades and decades working out a language and a map and all that other sort of stuff. You don't need to do as much as Tolkien did to write a fantasy novel, that's for sure. But but on the flip side, it can be. What I wouldn't necessarily recommend you to do is just say, right, I'm going to write a fantasy novel today. Boom, right, okay, let's here comes the wizard, because you'll probably end up with something that's a bit twee. It is worth spending a bit of time setting out. Okay, how do I want magic to work in my world? Roughly, what does the map look like? Let's not have magic horses unless they are specifically magic horses. All that sort of stuff. Do a bit of research. The other thing that is interesting is battle sequences and things like that. And I've spent a bit of time doing a bit of research for battle sequences and how they work in real life. What the capabilities of swords are, what the capabilities of bows are, and there's always more stuff you can learn there. I'm not saying I know everything about it, but it's actually worth doing a bit of research, and it just makes your novel that better grounded. If you Lord of the Rings did this a few times with Legolas's bow, didn't it? It seems to have an inexhaustible supply of arrows. It's like, I don't know, must admit, off the top of my head, I don't know how much an average quiver will hold in terms of arrows, but I'll be surprised if it was more than 20. because that's a fair number of things to carry on your back, isn't it? So things like that, and it's the same in other things in cop things where they have guns that never run out of ammunition, or even possibly laser pistols that just seem to have an inexhaustible supply of energy. Having things with limitations makes you focus on what the character can and can't do, and it will make their decisions be a little bit more realistic as well. So if you know you're running out of ammunition, that's a strategic stroke tactical thing that you've got to consider in your current situation. If you've got an inexhaustible supply of bullets, you're just going to sit there and just keep firing, right? Whereas if you've only got 6 bullets left, that's going to determine what you do next. So all those sort of things. You must wander among the trees. Your world building is not complete until you have at least 50 words for forest day. So there aren't any hard and fast rules on that sort of stuff. Okay, so some people can just imaginate, and that's the word that I know people don't like. So I'll stop using it. People can just imagine things and just start from that. Now that is a valid way to go if you think you can carry it off. I've tried it and failed. I find I write myself into a corner and it goes wrong. Low Earth orbit. Hello, sir. Good to see you. So I find that doesn't work for me. Now it may work for you because some people can actually carry it off. I can't. I get stuck. I go, what did I call that last time? And I get a bit confused. Laser guns with recoil. That's a bit weird. So I find the best stuff is where the devices or the characters or the animals involved, whatever it happens to be, have limitations. Even if they're super high-tech futuristic stuff, they should have limitations in the way they operate, which means that the characters have to use them in a tactical way. So if you've got a super amazing laser gun, for example, maybe it can only fire once a minute. Okay, so if you've got a gun that can obliterate things really, really easily, but you can only fire it once a minute, then the tactics for how you use it are going to be different to if it can fire every few seconds. Okay, so that's the thing. And maybe if something's potent and powerful, maybe it also has to be unwieldy. I.e., you've got this supermassive laser gun, but it needs to be moved about on big wheels, and it's an articulated thing, and it can't. Build in limitations. Have a think about how to balance the capabilities of the things that you have in your novel. One of the things that you always find, I think, sometimes with the super evil baddie in novels, is that they're ridiculously overpowered, and yet they still never win because they make fundamentally stupid mistakes. And we've had an entire series of streams, actually. I think two I did about how the evil baddies always make the same errors. Not completely and utterly relying on your super weapon is definitely one of those. All those sorts of things. But if you have something very, very powerful, then it must also be potentially difficult to use, or at least have some other limitation in practice, which makes it not quite so powerful in certain circumstances. It has a weakness. Hopefully a plausible weakness, unlike the exhaust port on the Death Star, which is a rather implausible weakness, even if it's quite a good weakness in the sense of a narrative construct. But try and balance it off, those sort of things. So I quite like the Death Star from a narrative perspective, in the sense that it's a massive planet-killing weapon. Okay, really, really fearsome, but it's also got a weakness that can be exploited by one guy and a lucky shot. Okay, that's very extreme example, but it sort of works. Okay, because it focuses a desperate attack with a 1 in a million chance, but it might come off. And it's the same when you're dealing with any kind of uber powered thing. Is that there's got to be a weakness in there that you can exploit. So all those sort of things. A 6-crank laser rifle. So again, work out how the technology works in your universe. It definitely is worth spending a bit of time playing around with how that works. Now I've been doing that a lot with the works and stuff that I've been doing with my next space opera series, because I want it to kind of incorporate a lot of the best of some of the stuff that I've been inspired by over the years. So, you'll know I'm a big fan of the original Battlestar Galactica, for example. So I like that whole fleeing from the Cylon tyranny, last Battlestar Galactica. I like that searching for a lonely planet called Earth kind of thing. That appeals to me. I'm a big fan of Elite, obviously. I like the whole tramp steamer spaceship model in space. That's quite fun. I really enjoyed the Homeworld series, where they're stuck on a desert world trying to figure out their origins. All those kind of ideas are really rather compelling. But I've got to work them into something that I think is cohesive, and that's the bit I'm doing at the moment. Is I'm trying to go, okay, well, if I want to have interplanetary spaceflight, how does it work? What's its limitations? And if it's got those limitations, how can we circumvent them for perspectives of drama? And if we're doing this, it has the impact on that, and so on and so forth. And that takes a bit of time to get that right. And putting all that together is your world building. And if you do your world building well, you'll be able to write a novel against it much, much easier than if you just sort of try and figure things out as you go along. Because the danger of figuring things out as you go along is you have to, as they say, deus ex machina your way out of problems. It's sort of, I need to get the goodies out of this problem by inventing a magic parachute. It suddenly appears, and I've only just thought of that because I need to think of that, because otherwise the goodies would be dead. That's not so satisfying for the reader. Whereas if the reader's got a chance of going, hang on, they had that technology that did this thing, can they not use that again? And then the characters go, shall we use that technology that we had the other? Then it's more cohesive. So that's quite good. Cylons can hack colonial ships and less computers. So that was good. Yes, I like the fact that that was clever. The colonials had super advanced computer systems linking all their vessels to make the nuclear vessels. No, linking all their vessels to make them more effective in combat. And then of course the deterrent, the counterpoint to that was that they got hacked, and they basically all the systems got disabled. So the response there in the reimagined Battlestar Galactica is actually to have more primitive tech, and that was more effective because it was more primitive. And I thought, that's brilliant. That's really, really good. So I like that sort of thing. And then you had the character stuff with Adama basically saying, I will not have a network computer system on my ship. End of. And but what about no? That's the rule. This is my ship. I will not have a network computer system on my ship. You get insight into his character then straight away. The topic is about the network computers, but what you're actually really seeing there is Adama basically saying, no, he doesn't take any crap. His rule is his rule. He's the captain. He's in charge. So say we all, exactly. So that is a really nice way of getting an insight into, okay, actually he is, despite the fact he's right at the end of his career, so we think at this point in the movie, and he's the captain of an amusement ship, a tourist attraction at this point in time. He's still the captain of a warship, and he's acting as the captain of a warship, and he's damned if he's not going to be a captain of a warship, even if Fighter Bay 2 has been turned into a tourist museum or whatever it is. So that is really good. That gives you a really good insight into his character. So that sort of stuff is, and you can use that as a writer. Okay, so the fact that somebody's disagreeable on a particular topic, you may, as a reader, you're going, oh, I wonder why. Is what are we learning about the character here? All of those things are quite good. Character's attitude to authority, character's attitude to money, character's attitude to everybody else. All of those things are useful ways to find out a little bit more about the people you're reading about. So they can be really, really powerful. June is a good one. I'm waiting with trepidation to see what the new movie's like, because it's one of those books that's it's probably there was another movie, wasn't there? There was I think in the 80s June was made into a movie. It was kind of okay, but it wasn't great. And it is a slow series, actually, the whole June series, but very interesting once you get into it. and quite a layered book. And a lot of background work had been done with the priestess movement and the spice which is used for interstellar travel and all those kind of things, and the navigators and all that kind of good stuff. So lots of clever world building has gone on in those novels to get them that far. So it's quite good. So again, I think if you want to write something that's got a bit of depth, a bit of longevity, I suppose, something that's going to last a bit longer than just, oh yeah, that was fun, just chuck it away kind of story, then it's worth having a little bit more world building to go with it. Because people will then dig into your world building a bit more, just want to find out a bit more about it and learn about it a bit more, and you can reinforce that with a series set in that universe and so on and so forth. So that's all quite good stuff as well. I must admit I haven't seen Caprica. It's one thing that's on my list of things. I never got round to watching it, so I do need to go. That's the problem I have, is I never have enough time to watch everything. The amount of time I've got to watch television is relatively limited. But one thing I'm reading at the moment, I'm reading His Dark Materials. I'm reading the books, because I haven't seen the miniseries of that either. So I'm actually reading Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials for the first time. Now, I've heard some good things about that, and so far it's interesting actually, because I'm reading it with relatively high expectations, and so far I've come across a few things in it that I've been a bit surprised by actually, because Philip Pullman's kind of like super renowned. And all the blurb on the back of the book is, this is a masterpiece of the 21st century and all this sort of stuff, which is a little bit overhyped, I think. And there's a few things I've noticed in the book, and I'm thinking, I wouldn't have done that. There's a big chunk of exposition dropped in for 2 or 3 pages, which I thought was very odd. Quite like the characterization so far. Some good bits and pieces in there, but a little, some of it's a bit confusing. And a few choices I'd have gone, well, yeah, that's telling, that's not showing. What are you doing, man? So that's quite weird. So I'm enjoying it. It's certainly readable. It's very, very interesting so far. But a few things in there kind of maybe raise my writer's eyebrow and go, okay. Do I like Andy Weir? Yeah, I really enjoyed The Martian. As a book, I was fortunate to read it before I saw the movie, which is, I think, always the best way round. That I thought was really good. One of the best books I've read recently. Really, really well constructed. Clearly done. They've stacked a load of research, but keeps it moving on a really, really, really good pace. So that I thought was an excellent book. I really enjoyed it, because at every stage I thought this is plausible. There's a few bits and pieces in it which aren't. I mean, the storm that they have at the beginning, which causes them the problem, wouldn't happen. But that's about the only one where I thought no, that's not right, because sandstorms on Mars, while they they certainly remove the visibility. They just don't have the force to knock over a spaceship. It's just not possible. But other than that, it was pretty good. So that I thought was an excellent book, and the pacing of that was really good. Just you do get some moments where he gets to chill out and enjoy. For example, when he eats his potatoes and things like that. You get a moment to, and the little bits of humour injected in where he gets sick of disco music because that's all he's got to listen to, stuff like that. And when he swears in the text messages back to NASA, and they say to him, "You can't do that because you're live on air. We can't screen it," and he just does it all the more because he knows he's in the public view. That stuff is excellent. That's really, really funny. So that is so that stuff is very, very well written. I thought Andy we did a good job on that. TV adaptation of Dark Materials is very good. Now, I heard bad things about. I've heard the TV adaptation is good, but there was a movie, wasn't there, called The Golden Compass, which apparently was really bad, and I don't know what the difference was. I will check out the TV series when I finish reading the 3 books. So I'll give that one a whirl. Rob's has just started reading something called Shadewood. I hope you enjoy that. That's an awesome. I think that's an epic undertaking. That's definitely a masterpiece of the 21st century. I'm pretty sure you'll be okay with that. Always find it interesting. Now you see, and JR1988 is commenting there on editorial style. Now editorial style has very much changed over the years, and it's interesting looking at some of the older books in the sort of science fiction and fantasy world, because a lot of stuff that happens in those now is very much frowned upon, and just you can't get away with it. Now, there's not just from a content perspective, but from a stylistic perspective as well. We demand our stuff nowadays is, in general, much faster paced than it used to be. You can certainly see that with movies. In a lot of movies nowadays, if something hasn't blown up for the last 15 seconds, everyone starts falling asleep. There's got to be action, there's got to be tense. You've got to move it on to the next scene, whereas older films are much, much slower paced, and there's just a lot of walking around and having a chat. It's all very relaxed. So it's some of that stuff is it's a style that changes over the years, and it will go back, I'm sure, in time. And you have to be conscious of the era in which the book was written and the editorial standards against which it was set to kind of appreciate where it sits in those kind of things. Things have changed a lot in terms of books and film pacing and all sorts of things. Disney movie adaptations that fell foul of well, that's another thing. I mean, that's probably worth a topic of its own. The whole business about should science fiction and fantasy or any other literary thing, because it exists, because it's a creative work set in, in the future or in the past, wherever it happens to be, but it's written now. Should it be making a commentary on the societal situation that we currently find ourselves in? Now, a lot of stuff does. All right, so. Battlestar Galactica was very dark and moody, very political, very social breakdown, society breakdown sort of commentary. The Expanse, arguably as well, very, very political stories. Or you compare and contrast with the original Battlestar Galactica and the reimagined one, very, very, very different tones indeed, even though they share some similar material and some of the same kind of ideas. Utterly different tone. Star Trek has always, for example, commented on social issues. That's Star Trek was designed to do that, actually. Whereas Star Wars is more just guns and adventure in space. At least it was up until more recently, when there's a sort of more of a sort of social justice element coming into some of the Star Wars films, which some people don't like, but it's there, and. Those sort of things. Now, is that good? Is that bad? Well, it's neither. It's something you can do. An awful lot of people use science fiction and fantasy because they're not set in our world, to allow us to step outside our world and look at it from another angle. Loads and loads of science fiction does that. The War of the Worlds, as we know, is probably a commentary, or at least most of it is commentary on, this insanely more powerful civilization basically comes and tries to exterminate humanity. Well, basically it's a commentary on the British Empire going over to Africa and exterminating the native people there. So that those sort of things are what would in the case of War of the Worlds, what would happen if somebody did to us what we're doing to them? And that's basically the premise of the novel. So that sort of thing's always been a flavour of science fiction and fantasy. Now, personally, I don't like doing that, okay? I like to write stories which are just there to be a story. I'm not trying to get you to think about things from a different perspective. I don't mind that if it's not too overt. If you present it to me like in, let's say, War of the Worlds does, in the sense of, this is just an observation, the British Empire was pretty rough on indigenous tribes. Here's a story where a super, much more powerful civilization is super nasty to the British Empire. There's a scenario. What happens? This happens. I'm quite happy to read that because it's not telling me whether things are right or wrong. It's just presenting it to me as a scenario, and I can appreciate that, and I'll have some thoughts on that. What I don't like is when a science fiction story is forcing, or is at least attempting to force me to a certain conclusion, and it's basically saying this is what you should think. That winds me up, and I don't like that, and I find that very annoying. And I try very hard not to do that in my stories because I don't like it. So things like that are but that's me. Your mileage may be entirely different. So The Handmaid's Tale. I mean, that's Margaret Atwood. Yeah, Margaret Atwood. That's a very, very good story, but it doesn't preach at you. It basically says, okay, here's a potential dystopian future that you may wish to avoid. What do you think of this? That's a very good story, worth reading if you haven't read it. I suppose it's kind of science fiction. It's sort of set in a not too distant future, but it's in a very odd, oppressive environment. Derpy, does being a writer pay? Would you recommend it? Don't go into writing if you want to be paid lots of money. No, absolutely not. For 0.0001% of all writers, yes, you'll be absolutely fantastic and rich and famous. For everybody else, the 99.99999% of writers, no, you will not make very much money whatsoever. I can assure you of that. It just isn't. It's just not a profitable thing to do. If writing for money, no. But most writers write because they just don't have a choice. Okay, they like writing, and if you try and turn it into a job, you run the risk of extracting all the joy out of it. And I complain about writing a lot, but I also love it very much indeed. Not being able to write would be horrific for me. Okay, I just like telling stories. I like the process of writing. I like the idea that people are reading my stuff and going, ooh, hey, that sort of stuff. Okay, it's the feedback that I like the most. I like crafting a story, and I like people reading it and going, when that happened, that really was like, wow, and this was happening, and then they're like, oh, I was crying about that, and that sort of stuff. Okay, is what writers really live for. Is and having some money as a result of your efforts is nice. There's no doubt about that. But if it's your primary motivation, there are far, far, far easier ways to make money. All right. And legal ones as well. I hasten to add. But you do get a nice hat. Well, if you want to wear a hat, you can. It's a sort of writer's thing. Feel free to wear a hat. It's I wouldn't recommend it for the money, but if you want to write something, you'll find it will always nag at you forever and ever and ever and ever until you get it on. To get it sorted, okay? Because telling a story is a very deep thing in the human psyche. I think it's for me it's one of those things that I just can't stop. I have to keep telling stories, and that's why I suppose I quite like waffling away on here. I get distracted. Oh, I just need to tell you about this. Yeah. And this funny thing happened with the pineapple. All that sort of stuff. I just can't help telling stories, okay? Because and the fact that there are people prepared to sort of sit around listen to me waffling on about anything. And also, hopefully, sometimes read my books. It's just, I think that's, I think it's extraordinary, really, but it kind of works. Writing is that thing that you do while sitting around waiting for a beer to grow. Yeah. So writing for me is about it's expressing myself in a way that I don't generally do. Sort of face to face. So if believe it or not, I'm actually quite a reserved person generally. Okay, which may be I'm actually strongly introverted, which may come across as a bit. Wait, hang on, he's sitting in front of a computer talking to invisible people. This is much easier for me to do this than it is actually to be in a crowded room and have multiple conversations going on all the time. because I'm introvert by nature, I can handle those events, but I need to distance myself from them after a certain amount of time, recharge. And writing for me is a way to deal with that and recharge in a constructive sort of way. So I find writing very therapeutic because I can explore my own feelings and the situations I've sort of seen and all that sort of stuff, and get it down in text. It sort of becomes a reality for me. I get very, I don't know, other writers may appreciate this as well. I get very emotionally involved with the characters in my stories because I spend an awful lot of time thinking about them and thinking how they react and what they do and who they are and how they, their personalities and all that kind of stuff. To the point it's, I certainly have had dreams about characters that I've written about. Which is quite weird actually, because of course in a dream everything feels realistic. You've got no kind of reality filter, so that can be quite, and that's sort of an indication to me that maybe I'm spending too much time doing this. I need to kind of go back out to the real world. But the real world is often so depressing and dull that actually the worlds that we create in writing and reading are actually far more compelling places to be. So it's a form of escapism. It is a form. It's probably a coping mechanism as well for for the weirdness that we have to deal with in the real world. We're all bots, says Buffoon. Yes, we established that before. None of you exist. You're just here for my entertainment. A camera and a computer screen. So yes, I suppose that's true. Now I would genuinely love to meet, I'm sure most of you, in a real life situation, but the complexities of international travel and stuff may always make that a problem. But it is easier to talk like this for me than it would be that let's say we're all in a pub. I'd find that very overwhelming very, very quickly. I wouldn't enjoy that as much. So that sort of stuff I'd find that problematic. But that sort of stuff is weird, really. But writing to me is a way of getting in touch with things that I want to express, things that I want to tell stories about, and how I feel about things. A way of exploring situations. You can live vicariously through different characters and all that kind of stuff. So since the UK left the EU, yes, that is a problem too. Can't get into the politics of that again. So what have we learnt after all this? So I mean, I always come back to this, and because I'm a character writer, I suppose I always come back to it because it's a comfortable thing for me to talk about, in the sense that if you're going to put characters in a story, make sure that they have realistic needs and wants and issues. Whether it's food or sleep or all of those sort of things. Consider the weaknesses of the characters. If you can give your characters weaknesses that people can identify with. I mean, another thing I used to be much more helpful and to people. This is quite a funny thing. Is I used to be much more helpful to people. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by it is, if somebody on Facebook or something like that, or somebody was in distress, in some sense, needing some advice, I used to volunteer my advice much more freely than I do now. Nowadays, I find actually, unless you ask me for my advice, I probably won't volunteer it anymore, and maybe that's just me getting a bit jaded with old age. But it's just, I tend to find it's just not worth the bother. So as I get older, my personality tends to has definitely changed over the years, and you can build that into your character profile as well. As the older, wiser guy basically says, okay, I'm just going to let the youngsters just make the same old mistakes. Sort of sit back and chomp your cigar, whatever your old guy does, while he's just going, okay, yeah, he's going to do that, she's going to do this, he's going to do that, she's going to do that, then they're going to argue, and now is the point where I can say my witty comment. And as you get older, you tend to see the same things happen again and again and again, and you just sort of wait for your cue. I certainly do that nowadays with a lot of people I interact with. Is why didn't you say anything? Well, I was just waiting for the right moment. So all that sort of stuff you can build into kind of, okay, that guy is a bit more worldly wise or worldly weary than some of the other people. All those sort of things. Introversion, extroversion, those are all characters you can, characteristics you can play with to make your characters more realistic. I'm very much an introvert by nature, but I can sort of act extroverty as the need dictates. So I can do it, but not for very long. But I've been around people long enough to see how different people react, and observing how people react makes your characters more interesting. So I feel that because it sucks to offer any advice from experience to be ignored. Yeah, so I mean, if you don't want my advice, that's absolutely fine. But if you do want my advice, then you probably won't get it for, well, you might get it for free, but you won't necessarily get it. I won't give it to you unless you're asking for it. The more people I meet, the more I like my dog. I must admit, I'm trying not to be quite so jaded, actually. I noticed myself getting very jaded with humanity, particularly over the last few years because of things that I don't agree with. So, regardless of your political situation, I'm sure there are things that go on in your various countries, politically or organisationally, that you just don't agree with. And for me, Brexit was one of those things. And various other bits and pieces that have happened either locally or regionally, politically wise in the UK. An awful lot of things I think, you stupid idiots, what the hell are you doing? And that's obviously my opinion. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but I don't agree with it. And then I'm looking at everybody else thinking, what a bunch of numpties. And so my sort of faith in humanity is, because they're not doing what I think they should be doing. Clearly they're obviously idiots because I'm obviously 100% right all the time. I'm sure everybody else feels the same way. I just kind of people. And I keep quoting. I've quoted this so often that my sons now just sing it back to me, which is the line from, I think is it Europe? No, it's either Genesis or Europe. There's too many people making too many problems and not enough love to go around. I think it's Genesis, isn't it? I can't remember. Or is it Europe? It's one of those two. Land of Confusion. It must be Genesis. Yeah, it's Genesis. It just said, yeah, okay, Dad. Not much love to go. Yeah, we know. So all that sort of stuff. And I was thinking, the world would be a much better place without all these wretched humans. And I was saying to my wife the other day when we were watching the Avengers a couple of months back, we got to the end of the Avengers, and I got to the end of one of the movies, and I said, that Thanos guy, I've got more sympathy for him than anybody else in that movie. And she said, yeah, but he wiped out like half the universe. And I said, yeah. He's got a point. And I remember thinking, maybe my kind of maybe I'm a bit off kilter. So stuff like that. But there we go. Never mind. It's you've got to be careful not to get too jaded because otherwise you start devaluing things a bit much. But there's a balance there, isn't there? There is a balance. Ah dear, never mind. Right, my friends. It is on that note. Make sure your characters have some food, okay? Juvat says the world would be a much better place without all these humans. Drew, you're starting to sound like a cat. Yes, Commander. I must admit, I'm not being an introvert and actually being entirely happy. I like my own company. If you stuck me in a desert island for a few months, as long as I had some food and probably some books and maybe a telescope, then I'd probably be fine. It wouldn't bother me too much. Some people would be some people would really struggle with that scenario. That wouldn't faze me at all. Darth Vader fan here, yeah. So we've talked about whether or not me becoming a superhero would be a good thing. It would not be a good thing. Okay, I would definitely abuse that power. I have great sympathy with Thanos. As any of you who watched my retro streams when I gleefully deleted all the attacking ships, just poofed them out of existence with nary a thought. So yes, I'm pretty sure if you gave me cosmic powers, I would abuse them virtually straight away. So that's problematic. I know my character flaws. I would be no good as a omnipotent being, that's for sure. But there we go. The power of Drew. So anyway, so keep writing, my friends. The important thing about being a writer is just to keep writing. But never stop writing, even if it's just some stuff. Okay, it doesn't matter. It could be a fractured seed. Just always keep writing. Now, I will be back on Thursday, and we will attempt to do some Elite Dangerous stuff with probably with Odyssey or maybe Horizons, depending on which one's working. We'll see what we can do. Maybe some comparisons between the two will be fun, because I've been having a look at that. So we'll do a bit of Elite Dangerous stuff on Thursday. That will be it for a couple of weeks. I'm actually going to take 2 weeks holiday, so I won't be back until I think it probably there's a second week in June. So look out on my Twitter or Facebook or whatever it is that you follow me on, or you'll get a notification obviously from Twitch anyway. But I'll be taking a couple of weeks break, going on holidays, and doing some stuff. We're having our house redecorated as well, which is going to be very disruptive. So that's going to be a bit fun and games as well. So a couple of weeks break. I'll be here on Thursday, but then there'll be 2 weeks off, and then I'll be back. I think my first stream back will probably be the retro stream, I'm thinking. So that'll be, I think, second week in June. I think that's what it is. So I will see you then. If you take absolute care of yourself until Thursday. Thursday we'll have a stream on Thursday, and then after that there'll be a couple of weeks break, and after that we will be back again. We will be back again to keep dissecting the wonders of science fiction and fantasy, and seeing where we can get to. And Scotland awaits. Yes, Scotland! Yay! That would be awesome. Am I going to the moon? The moon is made of cheese. I missed last Monday's stream, but I do have a cure for hyperacceleration. Okay, we'll check that one out. That would be good as well. But look after yourselves. Have a good one. Hope you've enjoyed this evening. Thank you very much for turning up. It's always good to have you along, and I really appreciate your company. It always cheers me up. It's always good to have a waffle. Am I taking the golf? Very unlikely. I haven't given it a proper long road test yet, so no, I don't have great confidence in taking the golf on a very long trip right now. But there we go. So look after yourselves. See you soon. I'll see you on Thursday. Have a fantastic week ahead. Look after yourselves. Still a crazy world out there, but have yourself a good one, and I will speak to you soon. And we'll be back. There'll always be more Drew, which may or may not be a good thing. Be good, my friends. See you soon, and look after yourselves.